your 1099 filing process this year. I am your moderator. My name is Geneva Brock, and I'm the marketing project lead here at Zenwork. I've been here for a little under 2 years, and my main role is providing compliance content to all of our users. So really my goal here is to make sure that you have the information you need about the changing compliance requirements and other things to know, even if you have filed before or if you're a new filer with us this year. Also on this session with me today is Ed Pratt. He is our host and he is our COO here at Zenwork, and he's been here for over 5 years, and he uses his 19 plus years of experience in compliance to prepare all of our users for 1099 e-filing as well. So you're in good hands with Ed here today. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions today, feel free to use the webinar chat box to ask those at any time. We'll try and respond to those questions throughout the session, but we'll also have some time at the end for question and answer. So if you have questions, we'll try and get to those at the end. If you want the notes from this session, we'll be sending a recap email at the end, and you'll receive the recorded demo, you'll get the PDFs of the slides that we've created, and we'll also send any answers to questions that we didn't get to during the session. Also, we have some questions that we'd like you to answer as well. So we have poll questions set up throughout this session, and we'd like for you to answer those. If you're looking for CPE credit today, you'll need to answer those if you want to receive your hour. But we also invite all of our other users on the session to answer those as well. A little bit more information on getting your CPE credit. All of the candidates must stay on the webinar for the duration of the session. So the credit hour that you earn is on a 50-minute hour, and you need to make sure that you stay on the session for the entire time. If there are any technical issues, you won't be able to get your credit. So hopefully you have a strong Wi-Fi connection. And candidates, as I said before, are required to answer all 4 of our poll questions. So make sure that you're doing that. And then in the follow-up email to this session, we'll get you some information on how you can get your certificate for those credit hours. Just a couple of our agenda items today. We're going to be discussing compliance changes as far as what's new with federal e-filing, and then also where state filing is headed. We're going to explain correction types and the processes involved in that. That's something that we have a lot of users asking us about from year to year. So nothing's really new with that process, but we're just going to go over it and make sure it's something that you understand. We're also going to talk about form delivery options, some traditional methods, and then maybe some things that you haven't considered before. We're going to show you what's new on our form and tell you how to use our platform for e-filing. And then we'll also have our question and answer at the end of this session. So before we get started here, I just want to go ahead and open up our first survey question. And this is just a reminder to all of our CPE credit candidates that you need to answer this question. And that question is, how are you currently filing your 1099 forms to the IRS? And you'll see some of your options there. Are you paper filing? Are you e-filing through the FIRE system? That's with the IRS. Are you e-filing through a third party? Time, and you're not really sure how you're doing that right now. Go ahead and answer that poll question. We're getting some votes in. I'm going to give it just a couple more seconds here, make sure everyone has an opportunity to answer that question. Looks like we're waiting on 3 more people to answer, so I just want to give that a couple more seconds. Okay, let's take a look at those results. So it looks like a lot of you are e-filing through a third party. And of course, we hope that you're filing with Tax1099 powered by Zenwork. And some of you don't know, a fair amount of you don't know how you're going to file your 1099 forms. And I hope that we'll be able to help you figure that out today. I'm going to hand it back over to Ed, and he's going to talk to us about federal e-filing, what's new, and all of our other agenda items today. So with that, Ed, would you like to talk to us about compliance changes?
Yeah, thanks, Geneva. I appreciate it. Thanks for the introduction. And my name, as Geneva said, is Ed Pratt. We're going to cover those agenda items that Geneva just went over, and the first one up is talking about some of the new things in federal e-filing. One is the new e-filing requirement for information returns. The IRS has made some changes to the numbers of forms that may be required to perform an e-file. We'll talk about that a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about the changes to the extensions. You may be familiar with those. They have modified how the extensions will work this year, specifically for W-2 and Box 7 on the miscellaneous form. And then we'll talk a little bit about another change the IRS made in how they will receive the Box 7 miscellaneous forms that are being filed late, and something that may cause an issue for you or a client later on down the line without you really even realizing it, without some assistance. So we'll talk a little bit about those three items here. The first one is the information return filing requirement, or e-filing requirement, has been aggregated now. So if you're familiar with this, you probably have heard the limit of 250 forms. It's kind of been the standard for as long as I can remember, that the IRS has said if you have, as a company, if you have 250 or more forms that you're filing for your miscellaneous or for your W-2 from the Social Security Administration or anything, you need to file those forms in an e-file manner. You can't paper file once you hit that 250 threshold. Previously, that had been on a form by form basis. So I could have done 200 1099 miscellaneous forms. I could have done 200 1099K forms. I could have done 200 1099 div forms, 600 total forms, and I would have been fine paper filing all of those forms. This year, the IRS has aggregated those form numbers, so the information returns that you may be filing are now going to be aggregated across that payer. So for you accountants in the audience, if you're working primarily with smaller businesses, this is not something that's really going to have any impact whatsoever on you. But if you do have one or two clients who may have a significant number of forms, you do want to start watching out and kind of keeping count across the numbers for those forms. You want to make sure that you've got your client prepared in order to be ready for that filing requirement, to do the e-filing if that's something that that is going to impact them based on the number of forms that they are having. So that's a pretty significant thing. Or your client can be penalized if they are filing through the wrong method, and so it could be something that trips people up. The IRS does have this threshold for the maximum number of forms that they'll allow for paper. What they don't have is any minimum number of forms to permit someone to e-file. So we have clients who e-file with us every year who just do one form. It's a small business. They come online, they fill out the form, they submit it, and they pay us. It's less than $5. They pay us every year to even to mail the form. But they come on every year and they do that one form. So the IRS is happy to receive any number of forms through eFile, but they do cap the maximum on the paper filing, and now it's aggregated across those different types of information returns. Moving on to the automatic extension. So again, you may be familiar with the automatic extension. In the past, and going back even several years ago, before the 2015 Hire Act came in and changed the due date for Box 7 and for W-2 forms, we were able to file an automatic extension for any 1099 form, 1098s, 3921, 22, all of those different forms. You were able to file an automatic extension for 30 days under the form 8809. You could file that via paper to the IRS. You could file that electronically if you have a platform that does that like we do. You could file that automatic extension, and you would know that your client or your business would be granted 30 days additional time automatically. A couple of years ago, as you're probably aware, the IRS, in order to help prevent fraud in tax refund dispersals, they pushed that date back. It was actually mandated by Congress through the 2015 Hire Act. And so Box 7, your non-employee compensation on 1099 miscellaneous forms and W-2s, became due on January 31st, whether you're paper filing or e-filing. They decided that January 31st would need to be the date that those were turned in by the payer. Um, Even so, for 2016 and 2017 tax years, you were able to file an automatic extension of 30 days time to submit that via paper or via e-file to the IRS, whether it was Box 7 for the miscellaneous form or it was a W-2. You were able to keep that 30-day extension going. Now they've moved to where the Box 7 on the 1099 miscellaneous and the W-2 are no longer getting automatic extensions. So you are going to need to make your filing in a timely manner for January 31st for the W-2s and for the Box 7 non-employee compensation on the 1099 miscellaneous forms. You can still do other boxes. So if you are maybe working with a property management client and excuse me, they have a significant number of rent boxes. They're filing a lot of 1099 miscellaneouses with Box 1. Those are still due March 31st for the e-file, and you can get a 30-day extension, automatic extension on those. So you can have up to April the 30th to file those Box 1 amounts. So really, this change is just impacting the Box 7 on the miscellaneous form and the W-2 form. With our client base, that's most of what our clients are filing. You know, they're typically accountants who are filing for their small business clients who have hired a contractor to come in and do some work. We do have quite a number of people who are doing 1099K forms and div forms. A lot of times those aren't necessarily the accountants. They're doing them in smaller volumes on the accountant side. But we do offer that 8809, and the IRS does still offer that as a 30-day automatic extension for anything that's outside of the Box 7 and the W-2. Now, having said that, they did make a few allowances for what they're calling safe harbors. So the safe harbors you'll see on the 8809 form itself. You can pull that 8809 form up if you want to. Just Google IRS form 8809. There'll be a PDF that comes up, and you can see what these safe harbors are. There are safe harbors for federally declared disaster areas. So you know, think California with the fires, think North Carolina with the hurricanes, Houston last year with the hurricanes. So those are federally declared disaster areas. You can get an extension of time for your Box 7 and W-2 for that. Fire, casualty, natural disaster. So something happens to the business records of the business owner. They have an office fire, and the 1099 records, their payment records were all on paper and got burned up. That is a valid reason for filing that extension. The death, a serious illness, or an unavoidable absence of the filer of the information return, so the person who's responsible for doing that filing either dies or has a serious illness that incapacitates them, then that is a valid reason for getting that. Those are the safe harbors that you have. What you have to do in those situations is do a paper filing, and you have to check the safe harbor box. You have to sign that form, that 8809 form, under penalties of perjury, in order to make sure that that you are saying yes, you know, this truly did happen. We're in a federally declared disaster area, or fire, or death or serious illness. So one of those things happened, and we're not able to produce the 1099s in a timely manner. There's a couple more that are also on the 8809 businesses that are filing their information returns for the first year. So a brand new business, the IRS has a special safe harbor for those, just because they may not be familiar with the process. It may take a little bit more time. They may not have been keeping very good records. You guys who are accountants are probably familiar with that from clients who are brand new to business. They will allow a 30-day extension in that circumstance. Again, just a checkbox on the 8809 form has to be formed manually. And then filers who did not receive timely data on a third-party payee statement. And they've got a couple of examples of this on the form itself. I personally don't encounter that a whole lot, so I'm not terribly familiar with that, but definitely something that may apply to you or your clients. I'm not getting sick sick pay documentation, not getting Schedule K1 in a timely manner. Those are things that are on the Form 8809 as a potential safe harbor. So those are some of the things that are new for this year. I think Geneva has a survey question now for this, so I'm going to pull that up, and Geneva, ask you to step in for that question.
Yeah. So that's some great information on extensions and also on the aggregated forms. So you see a question on your screen right now. Which box on the 1099 miscellaneous form is no longer eligible for an auto extension through that 8809 form? And just a reminder to all of our CPE candidates, you need to answer this question if you'd like to receive your 1 hour of credit. Looks like we're getting some responses in. Gonna give that a couple more seconds, make sure everyone has some time to answer that question. Just a couple more people that we're waiting on here. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end the voting now and share those results out. So which box on the 1099 miscellaneous form is no longer eligible for an auto extension? And the answer here that most of you selected is the box 7 for non-employee compensation. So that is the form that also has some safe harbor allowances that Ed was just discussing. So that's something to keep in mind if you've kind of leaned on that extension before in the past. This year, you won't have that safety net. So just be aware of that. And I'm going to hand it back over to Ed now for some continued information on compliance changes on the federal level.
All right, thanks, Geneva, and thanks everyone for answering the survey question there. We're going to move into talking about the late 1099 miscellaneous box 7 forms. This has been a best practice for the last couple of years. So basically, again, going back to the 2015 Hire Act and the move to submit the deadline, or to change the deadline to January 31st for your box 7 on the 1099 miscellaneous form. The IRS suggested to all of us e-filers that it would be a really good idea to start submitting those box 7 amounts in separate file batches from the other boxes. So say, for example, you have a client who has 10 forms, 10 1099 miscellaneous forms that have box 7 amounts on them. But they also have a couple of other forms. You know, they've paid a dividend out to an owner, or they had some sort of rent payment that they needed to pay. Those are going to be in non-box 7. So what we have done, based on the IRS's recommendations to eFile providers, is for the past couple of years, we've been separating those out. So you don't really necessarily see a whole lot about that. You know, you go in, you build those 12 forms, you submit those 12 forms, and we kind of manage on the back end to submit the box 7 amounts separately from the box 1 amounts or the box 3 amounts that you might have for those other circumstances. What the IRS is doing now is they're requiring anyone who is e-filing the forms to make sure that those batches are submitted separately. And it really is particular when you're past the deadline for the box 7 amounts. So in this circumstance, you might have those 10 forms that you're filing for box 7. You might have 2 forms that you're filing under box 1 for the same client. You submit them and you set the schedule date for January 31st for the box 7 amounts and March 31st for the box 1 amounts. That's totally fine, and Tax1099 will handle it just that way. You then find out, say, in the middle of February, that your client wrote a check to a vendor. They didn't tell you about it. They didn't enter it into QuickBooks or Xero or anywhere. They just remembered as you were kind of going through the checkbook with them they remembered that they wrote this check to this guy that they completely forgot about. They did, maybe they did get a W-9 and kind of did that process, but they just forgot to put it back into the accounting system. That'll happen sometimes. So when that happens, you will be able to file that new form in February for that new that new check or that new circumstance that just arose. However, what the IRS's concern is that if you submitted that box 7 amount and you submitted the other box 1s that were out there at the same time, so February 15th, for example, that's going to cause the IRS some confusion. If they were going on the same file to the IRS, that's going to cause the IRS some confusion, and they're going to say all 3 of those forms are now late instead of applying the different deadline rule to those box 1 forms. So this is not necessarily something that, again, if you're using Tax 1099, this is not necessarily something that you have to worry about a whole lot. But if you have a client who is filing maybe to the IRS themselves, they're using the fire system themselves, they're a bigger client, and they just say, yeah, we can handle this. We've got an IT person who will take care of this for us. If they're doing that themselves, this is something that they're going to want to watch out for, because they're going to want to be sure that they're submitting their box 7s and their other boxes separately. We'll do it manually, or we'll do it automatically for you, but anyone who's filing those directly to the IRS needs to be aware of this rule. The next thing that we want to talk about is state filing. So we get questions all the time from our clients saying that either they're not aware that they even had a state filing requirement, or that maybe they haven't been doing the state filing, or they thought that was all taken care of. There's really about 3, maybe even 4 different situations that may be applicable for the different states. The first one is listed here. It's the Combined Federal State Filing Program. There's 32 states that are participating in the Combined Federal State Filing Program. If you have clients in those states, if you yourself are in those states, that's great. That makes it really easy, because we just automatically file those to the Combined Federal State Filing Program through our IRS eFile. That was hard to say. We file those directly to the state through the Combined Federal State Filing Program through our IRS eFile program. There are some states, though, that have started to drop out. So one of the New England states, I can't remember if it's Maine or Vermont, but one of them dropped out this year and are now requiring a direct filing. So that's kind of the second scenario. A state may require a direct filing. Some states have been doing this for years. So Oregon has had an eFile requirement that's been on for several years now. Pennsylvania has had a direct filing requirement that's been on for several years now. Massachusetts turned one on recently. North Carolina just recently went to doing a direct file program. So there are some states that have dropped out of the Combined Federal State Filing Program and are now requiring their own. And the main reason that they've done that is because they've been slow to get the information from the IRS. The IRS usually sends around that Combined Federal State Filing Program information in the middle of the year, so June, July. You may even get something from a client. Your client might get a letter that says, from the state, that says, we did not receive your 1099 miscellaneous filing. We get a few questions about that from our clients every year. Those are clients who did participate in the Combined Federal State Filing Program. We sent it to the IRS. The IRS is sending it to the states. It just hasn't gotten there yet. And so that was a frustration on the state level. And so some of the states have been moving away from the Combined Federal State Filing Program so that they can get that information faster by doing the direct filing. Another circumstance that may happen is sort of a combined circumstance. So a state may participate in the Combined Federal State Filing Program, but they may also require a direct filing if there are state tax withholdings from any of the 1099 miscellaneous payments. So they may have a sort of a combined situation where they're happy to accept the Combined Federal State Filing Program in general, but if you have a client who has a payee that is subject to backup withholding and they are getting withheld on the state, then that state's going to require those particular forms to be filed separately. And then the fourth one are the states that are just the easiest to work with, Texas, Florida, and so forth, that have no state income tax. So you don't even have to worry about filing with state with those. So just kind of what we can expect. The IRS, I was at the IRS tax forum in Orlando back in September, I guess it was, and had a couple conversations with some of the people there. And the IRS is really hoping to kind of speed up that combined federal state filing program so that they can provide that information in a more timely manner to the states. Until that happens, though, we just are kind of expecting more states to kind of go it alone. Making sure that that they are getting that information even before the time that the IRS might be able to send it to them. Now, we do keep track of all of that. We have our own internal analysts, tax analysts, who are working both on the federal and on the state requirements. We also contract with a third party to make sure that we don't miss anything. So we have a couple of different areas where we're getting the information both on the federal and the state level, making sure that we keep track of that. And one of the things we've done this year is to help automate that process. In the past, we didn't really have a very good way to do the state filing on an import basis. It was a bit of a manual process to go in there and make those state filings. We've done a lot of programming work on the state filing side this year to make sure that we're identifying the filing requirements and then giving our users a chance to opt in or to opt out to the state filing. We do charge additional amounts for the state filing piece, but if you want to opt out and do it yourself, or if your client's already taken care of it some other way, we're happy to let you opt out of that as well. And you don't have to do the state filing through us. We'd still take care of the IRS e-filing for you. All right, so another situation that comes up fairly often are corrections. And I want to be clear that what I'm talking about on the corrections are forms that have already been filed to the IRS. So they've already gone out to the IRS. They've already been e-filed to the IRS. After that point, when you need to do a correction, if you've used Tax1099 in the past, you know we let you schedule your forms to be delivered to the IRS, to e-file to the IRS on a particular scheduled date. You can set it as late as the deadline date for that particular form. So usually January 31st or March 31st. If you're coming in, let's say you scheduled a Box 7 form for January 31st, and you come in, you realize you need to make a change to that form, but it's still January 25th, the form hasn't gone to the IRS, you can edit that form. There's no problem with coming in and editing that form. We don't charge anything for editing that form while it's still waiting to be sent to the IRS. The only thing we'd charge you for would be an additional mailed copy if you need us to mail a copy. But after January 31st, you find out from a client on February the 15th that a form that you filed for them on January 31st had the wrong amount on it. You're going to need to do a type 1 correction, and it could be a void, so it should have been a zero amount. That person never should have been notified. It could be just a difference in the dollar figure. The client had put in a business an expense reimbursement as an actual services rendered payment, and you need to go in and change the amount. So that's a type 1 correction, pretty simple and straightforward. You just go in and make a new form that is a corrected form, checking the correct box at the top, and entering the new amount for that form. A bit more complicated are the type 2. That's when there's something wrong with the vendor name or the taxpayer identification number. And the situation there is basically whoever entered the data. So maybe the client is entering their vendors into QuickBooks. Maybe they transpose 2 digits in the social security number. Easy enough to do. They're manually entering that information. If they're using a handwritten W-9 form, then I know nobody can read my handwriting, so it could be easy to transpose a couple of digits there in the taxpayer identification number. So in that situation, you actually have to void. You have to do a type 1 correction for the original form that you entered. You've got to use the bad information, the bad name or the bad taxpayer identification number, and void out that form. And then go in and do a brand new regular form under the correct information. Tax1099 can handle both of these, and I'll kind of show you what the process looks like here in a few minutes when we go into the demo side. But either of these two may pertain after the e-filing has been done to the IRS. Geneva, I think that brings us to our third survey question. So I'm going to bring that up if you don't mind.
Yeah, so we have a quick, just little check-in here to see if you understand how corrections work. The question is, if I need to correct the dollar amount in a box, what type of correction is that? And your options here are the type 1 correction or the type 2 correction. And we're already getting a lot of responses in here. Give it a couple more seconds. What type of correction is changing a dollar amount in a box? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the voting here and share those results out. If you need to correct the dollar amount in a box, that is, as most of you have selected there, it is a type 1 correction. So as Ed said, you would go through and create a new form, mark that form as corrected, and just put in the right box amount in that form. So the more simple of the two types of corrections. Thanks everyone who responded to that question. And I'm going to shoot it back over to Ed now to continue with our training session.
All right, thanks, Geneva. Just a few more slides here, some things that that you may or may not be aware of that we want to let you know, and then we'll dive into the software for just a couple minutes. The vendor form delivery options, there are a couple of traditional ways that you can deliver those. You can obviously, if you're doing paper filing in the first place, you're going to have the copy that you would pull out and send over to the recipient. So you could print and mail those. In Tax1099, we have a PDF that allows you to do the same thing. You can print and mail that. You can have us mail the form for you through the U.S. Postal Service, or you can contract with a vendor to do that for you. On the more electronic side, the IRS does allow electronic delivery of the forms. Those can be delivered via email. They can be delivered via a secure portal. There's a couple things to keep in mind if you do decide to go the route of electronic. You do need to you do need to obtain permission from the vendors before sending their forms electronically. And really, sending an email is typically how you're going to do that. If you're using a portal, then you should gather that acceptance through the portal. But if, for example, if you're sending email copies from Tax1099 to vendors, then you or your client should just confirm via email that that participant is willing to accept that and just track that acceptance, that opt-in for receiving that on an electronic manner. And it could be an advantage to doing the email version or an electronic version. One thing that that you could do is see who has opened the email. You could see if you got a bounce back from the email that was undeliverable and follow up with that vendor. So there's a little bit of an advantage there to doing that as opposed to just sending it out in the mail, and probably it gets there, but you don't really know for sure if the mailed copy is actually being received. And if you use our portal for e-delivery, we do manage that opt-in, opt-out portion of the information for you. A couple of little known facts about e-filing. The first one here, joint submission for all the forms under a payer. The IRS prefers on a paper filing basis that you send all of the information for that payer at the same time. So if you've got 25 1099 miscellaneous forms, they want to get them all at the same time. If you have to send another one later, they're going to have to go through, do extra scanning, do extra work, and it takes a lot longer for them to manage that process. For e-filing, though, because the IRS prefers to receive e-files, they don't really care if they get multiple submissions for a client. They're fine with getting 5 different submissions of 5 forms each for that client that had 25 forms. So just a little bit of a breather for you. You don't have to worry about irritating the IRS by sending too many different submissions. The 1096, of course, is not required when you're e-filing. That is taken over by the e-file itself. The e-file replaces the 1096. We do offer a version of the 1096 on the platform, so you can have it to kind of keep with your paperwork, but you don't need to send that anywhere. It doesn't go out to the IRS. And then separate state filing. Sometimes you need to do separate state filing, but not always. I mentioned earlier the combined federal state filing program. You've got 30 or so 30 or so states that will permit the combined federal state filing, but you will have some states that are going to require some different forms to be sent. A couple new things that are going on in Tax 1099. We have a new QuickBooks Desktop option. We're actually still working on testing that and just getting it finalized, so it's ready for the season. But that will be a PDF import option. If you used Tax 1099 last year, we had that option for W-2s coming from QuickBooks Desktop, and this year we're opening that up for 1099 miscellaneous forms as well. So you'll have really 3 different ways to get information into Tax 1099 from QuickBooks Desktop for 1099 miscellaneous forms. We've got a two-way sync for QuickBooks Online, Xero, and Bill.com. That's related specifically to recipient information. We offer, as you may know, we offer a W-9 tool to solicit the W-9 electronically. We also offer a 10-match service, so you could collect a W-9 from Tax 1099 using the electronic version of that W-9. You could 10-match, make sure the information provided by the vendor is correct, and then you could sync that information back to your accounting software and have the information in both places that would be consistent. Likewise, we've got the ability to pull information out of QBO and Xero and Bill.com as well. We also have introduced a notice feature for enterprise accounts. It is an additional charge for the notice feature, but it may be useful to some of you who do tax. It's listed here as a B notice feature. B notices probably won't be that important to you until spring, when your clients start to get the B notices, the first round of B notices from the 2018 filing season. But what this notice feature will do is, for the B notice, it provides a template letter that you can send out to the recipients that is based on the letter that the IRS requires. You will have the W-9 that you can send out. You'll be able to track those when you sent it. Make sure you're meeting the timeliness requirements for doing the notices. We also have a lot of other notices that are out there as well. So again, going back to kind of how we've brought in some tax analysts on our side just to keep us up to date, make sure that everything we're doing is right. We've had them build out some of this notice work. So we are, again, offering that to enterprise account holders. So maybe something that you might be interested in. And speaking of enterprise accounts, again, if you're just not familiar with the enterprise accounts, there's some workflow rights there. There's some user management, so you can set up multiple levels of users in your organization. If that's something that applies to you, if you're a sole proprietor, then you don't need to worry about this. But if you have 10 different people in your office who are doing the 1099 process, you want someone to enter the data, someone else to review the data, then you have the ability to do that with the enterprise software. Everybody gets a separate login, and you can track each of their individual actions separately, so you can audit, go back and see who did what. And you also get 250 10 matches included as part of that enterprise account. So I'm going to bring up my desktop here and take a quick look around. So give me just a moment to open this, and we'll start looking over at Tax 1099. All right, here we go. So we're on the dashboard here, and the dashboard for now hasn't changed. We're still kind of looking at maybe changing around some of the pages here. So if we do that, we'll send out some additional information to those of you who are taking this class now, and send you out a version of the recording that would have included the user interface changes. But for now, we pretty much are looking like we did last year. I'm logged in as an enterprise client, and so because of that, I have a couple of additional statuses. These are new: submitted for review, review and approved, reviewed and rejected, and then resubmitted for review. So if I rejected something and somebody needed to resubmit it, those are all there, and so it's color coded here. If I go back and look at a prior year, you can see that those are all there from the prior years as well. So just same as in prior years, if you wanted to kind of limit things down, you could do that through the dashboard. So you're only looking at particular areas, particular clients that you may be interested in. We also introduced last year a client ID feature. Some of our accountants use client IDs to be able to bill internally, to be able to make sure they're charging back to their clients. And so now you can search by the client ID if that is a field that you're using in Tax 1099 on the payer level. You can put that information in there. I mentioned the state filing. I'm going to go through real quickly and just show you a couple of things on the state filing for adding in a form. I'm going to do a 2018 to 99 miscellaneous form here. While I'm doing it, I'll just point out the corrected feature as it loads in here. You've got the corrected box up at the top. That corrected box will be what you'd choose if you were doing a type 1 correction or if you were doing step 1 of the type 2 correction and voiding out that form. So you've got that option there. Like always, you've got your existing payers, you've got your existing recipients who may be here. Go through, and so this person happens to live in Colorado, and so you can see we plugged in the Colorado information down there. I've got some other people who live in different states. All right, this person lives in Texas, and so you can see there's nothing that appears here because there's no state filing requirement for Texas. Texas doesn't even need to know about the income that has been listed there. Let's see if I've got somebody, California. So again, California, combined federal state filing state. It looks like I've got a lot of people in California for this particular one. All right, here we go. So Massachusetts has a separate state filing requirement. We can fulfill that electronically, so you get a pop-up box here that talks about how you need to go about fulfilling that requirement and what will charge you for that. I'm going to click OK to enable that to be submitted to the state of Massachusetts as well. And then you have a kind of a notice down here, a red box down here that says, shows you what you might need to look at. You might need to change that state payer ID for that particular client on that particular form. So you've got a little bit of information there that just kind of works to help you file that form. Because I've selected it there, going through that process, I'm able to see it on my next page. We're automatically going to provide that state filing bot being checked over here for you on the Massachusetts. So I've got a couple of those that I've done for Massachusetts. This is the one that I just did. So I've got that option there available for me, and is showing me that I'm going to be able to file that to the state of Massachusetts. Still regarding the state filing, I'm going to go over to, let's say I completed this filing. I had done all of my filing, and I had chosen not to do a state filing during the process of doing it. I did have a Massachusetts resident, but I wasn't willing to do the filing at that point. I wasn't sure if I needed to do it or not. I went and I checked, and I do need to do it. We've added on the Manage Forms page, where all of the forms go to live after you have them. We've added a state filing option there, so you would be able to go in and file for the state after you've done the federal filing. We can't do a state filing if you do the federal filing elsewhere, but if you've done the federal filing with us, you can come in and do the state filing after the fact. That's a brand new thing we weren't able to do in prior years. Something else that we weren't able to do in prior years that I think will be good news for you, and this has to be old year because I don't have anything submitted recently in 2018. But in prior years, if you went in here and you wanted to block a form, let's say I had submitted 5 different forms and I'd submitted them all under the same reference number. So actually down here is a little bit of a better example because these are all in this 4453 series for my my eFile reference number. If I wanted to block just this one form, I would not have been able to do that in prior years. I would have had to block the entire reference number and then go back in and refile them. This year, you will be able to block a single form from a reference number. So that's a nice feature that enables you to get rid of a form. Let's say you found out that this person or this entity was a C corporation. You didn't need to do the filing for them, or all of the funds that they had been paid were actually supposed to have been expense reimbursements, but they had been categorized incorrectly in QuickBooks. You would be able to come in and block just that one form, leave the other forms active, and enable those forms to move forward through the process, so that you've got that. Got those other forms still going out there. A couple of other things that have just been introduced on the enterprise side. Again, the enterprise is a subscription, generally for the larger filers. Unmasking PDFs. So on a global basis, on my entire account, I can choose to have all of my PDFs unmasked. And unmasked means showing the full social security number or EIN or even an ITIN on a 1099 form, showing that full 9 digits exposed on the PDF. The IRS recommends that you not do that, but we do have people who want to see it that way. And so on an account level basis, you can make that unmask available there. You can also, on the box 7, go ahead and default this for all of your filings that you do to January 31st, for example, or to January 30th, January 29th, whatever date that you wanted to do that for your various account level options. So that's something that it just rolled out in the last couple of days. I'm still checking to see if we're going to put in the other boxes for the miscellaneous that would be due later. So we'll have an update on that a little bit later on in the month here. Speaking of the unmasking of forms, one thing that I neglected to mention back over here, under the Manage Forms option, we have had in the past the ability to unmask the taxpayer identification number on the PDF forms. Unfortunately, once you had submitted those forms, once they had gone to the IRS, you were no longer able to do that. So that will be available now. You'll be able to unmask the taxpayer identification number on the PDFs if that's something that you find out you need. And again, the IRS doesn't recommend that, but it is something that you may have a client who says, "I know I need to get that with the TINs unmasked, so I can make sure that they were right." You just may want to check it yourself. So you do have the ability to unmask that on the PDF copies that you receive now. So that is again something that's new and available for you. We've also added a couple of larger export options. So see this button here that says Export to Excel for all payers. I can download all of my form information for all of my different clients into one Excel copy. So at the end of the season, if I wanted to go through and just have one Excel file that had all of my client information in it, I could certainly go through and do that. We put that in a couple places, so that's one of the places. The other place is under the Manage Recipient page. So this is the recipients for all of my client base here. I'm going to pick a different client that's got a few more things going on in their sample here. So here I can do this export to Excel for all payers. And so I'd be able to download all of my different clients' recipients into one file. When I do that, one of the neat things about this is that I get to pick what the output looks like on the Excel file. So if you're using our Excel import, you could put it into the 1099 miscellaneous template, and it would put it into our current 1099 miscellaneous template. So you would have the payer information and the recipient information. All you'd need to put in there would be the amounts that were paid to that recipient. If they changed an address, if you had a new recipient, you'd add that to it. But you could import all of your clients all at one time if you wanted to on that import using this export to Excel for all payers. While I'm here, I'll just mention a couple of more things. One is the syncs to QBO and to Bill.com and to Xero. I mentioned those during the slide portion of the presentation, how you were able to sync this information back. So I got a W-9 completed here for this company. If I wanted to, I could take it, I could sync it back to QuickBooks, I could sync it back to Bill.com, I could sync it back to Xero. It sends not only the information itself here, it also sends a PDF copy and attaches it to the vendor record over there in your other software. So again, just something that you may be interested in, especially if you've gone through and you've done the TIN match for that recipient. Another thing that we've been asked to do is to enable an inactivation for our recipients who are no longer getting paid. So you know, that happens a lot with your clients. They'll hire somebody who will work for them for a little while on a contractor basis, but then they're no longer actively working. So you deactivate them in QuickBooks or Xero, but they're still active over here in Tax 1099. Well, you can inactivate someone, and then you can come back in and you can return that person to an active status if you need to. So I can inactivate or reactivate a vendor as the case may be, and we retain all those records still for you out here in Tax 1099. So again, just a few things. I mentioned the notices that's available for enterprise. If you if you upgrade your enterprise option, then you would have the ability to use the notices piece of the software. And I don't think I actually have it turned on for myself. Oh, maybe I do. But you'd be able to come in here and assign yourself some tasks to do with those notices. You can see I've got a couple of different things that I've started out here that give me the ability to go in and just kind of manage the process for any notices that my client might receive. So again, maybe something that you're interested in, may not be something that you're interested in, but it is available if it is something that you might find useful. With that, I think I'm going to take us back, see if we've got some questions that may have come up, and take us back in and do the final question as well.
Yeah,
Just a
and
moment.
on that final question there, it seems that I may have missed out on a slide. We didn't cover this information yet, I don't believe. In order to e-deliver forms to vendors, which is not needed, this is something that you probably are familiar with. Many of you have used traditional forms of delivering, like just printing and mailing forms, getting those forms and sending those out that way, or using a third-party USPS mailer, such as Tax1099. There's many others as well. Um, or you may have transitioned over to e-delivery of your forms, and that could be done either by emailing through or perhaps like Tax1099, they use a um, portal delivery, which will take vendors to a separate location outside of a PDF sent to an email, and the vendor can retrieve a form from that portal. So as you're looking through this survey question, in order to e-deliver forms to vendors, which is not needed, many of you may not be aware that often from vendor is required for e-delivery. The IRS would like for you to get permission from your vendors before you send any of that sensitive information out. It looks like we're still completing a summary here. And just a reminder as well, if you have any questions, we may not be able to get to those in this session, but we will be following up on those by email. So go ahead and chat those into the box on the left side of your screen. And let's give this survey a couple more seconds here. We've got almost all of our responses in. Just want to give it a couple more seconds, make sure everyone has a chance. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the voting here and share the results to this survey. In order to which is not required, this is kind of a question just to make sure you're all awake out there. And the answer would be pre-printed 1099 forms. You wouldn't need to buy any of those forms from Office Max or wherever you usually get those. You wouldn't need to buy those in order to e-deliver forms, but you would need opt-in permission from the vendor, and you would need an electronic method for delivery, whether that's through Tax1099 or some other source. So that is our last survey question that we have here, and we'd like to jump into a little bit of question and answer now. And we had a really good question earlier, and that was from Janine. Are corrected forms subjected to late filing fees? That is a great question. And Ed, are you still on this session? It looks like he may have had some difficulty. Let me see if I can contact him. Okay, I'm not hearing from him right now. That's a great question though, Janine, about the penalties for the forms. The penalty for an incorrect filing is actually much more than for a late filing. And another thing to consider there is that the IRS really appreciates and puts a lot of confidence in people who are following good faith when they're trying to get their filings submitted to the IRS. And so for that reason, would recommend that you correct any of your incorrect filings, both because your penalties would probably be less that way, and also because if it is an incorrect filing, you should just correct that information. Of course, you can consult a tax professional or seek out help on that if you would like to get more information. But that's something that you should consider. Looking through some of these other questions now. If we scheduled 1099s with box 7 and box 1 for the same client to transmit on 129, for example, will the box 7 be sent in a different submission? So you can override whatever scheduled date we select for your forms. We automatically select forms to be scheduled a week out from your submission, unless that will cause the forms to be late, of course. So if you submit your forms, say, on the 30th of January, we would have those submit to match the deadline that they needed to be submitted by. But if you want your forms to all submit at the same time, you can have that happen. We would maybe submit those in different batches. They would have different confirmation numbers, perhaps. But yeah, you can have those submit whenever you choose if you don't like the automatically scheduled date that we select, which would be generally a week out. Another good question here, can you delete a form or is the only option to block a form you don't need? Well, that's a great question, and that depends on when you're trying to delete the form. So if you have already submitted to the IRS, you may have time to block that form before it's officially received. If you're going through just creating your forms and you're viewing and editing those forms, you would be able to delete the form at that time. But after the form has been in the process of submitting to the IRS, the only way that you'd be able to keep that form from being submitted is to block it. And as Ed mentioned, we're now able to block forms on a one-by-one basis instead of by the entire batch. So that's something that you can keep in mind there. Let's see if we have other questions. Looks like we have a couple people typing here, so I'm going to give that a second. So we have another question here about the separate submissions of box 7 forms from other forms. If the submission date is the same, I would have to check on that. So I will get back to you to make sure that I'm giving you the right information. But we would follow whatever requirements the IRS has. Our system is auto-programmed so that we make sure we follow any compliance requirements. So if the big issue for that, though, the box 7 amounts, is if it's going to be a late filing. So if you have a box 7 1099 miscellaneous form that you're trying to submit after January 31st, that's when that issue with late filing penalties comes into play. So hopefully you won't have to worry about that part of it at all. But if you're using Tax1099, rest assured that we will take care of whatever compliance requirements there may be. And you will get 2 reference numbers for your different filings. So those box 7 amounts will be submitted in a separate batch from your other box forms. It looks like we're out of time for this session. I'm going to go ahead and leave it open for a little bit longer so that you can chat in any of your questions. And you can also feel free to just contact the support team at any time, and you can access them through our live chat tool on our website, or you can give them a phone call, or you can respond to any of the emails that you were sent, and we can get all of those questions answered for you. I don't want to keep you all too much longer today. Thank you so much for joining us on the training session. We are so happy that you joined us, and we were really happy to be able to provide CPE credit. And we will be following up with everyone with an email on how to receive your certificate after the session is over. And we'll also be sending out our PDF of the slides so that you can have those for your notes. You can circulate those throughout your office and make sure that everyone on your team is prepared for the 1099 filing season. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope that you have a great day.